All right, this Sunday, the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship final. We've done all the build-up from Kilkenny, and it's time to turn our attention to the All-Ireland holders and the four-in-a-row chasers. Delighted to be in Murrow, in County Limerick, with none other than Joe Quaid. Joe, how are things?
Good, all good this morning, Shane.
Flying it. So I was driving through Kilkenny this morning, flags everywhere, but then you come into Limerick, and there really are plenty of flags in Limerick. You'd think they'd be sick of the success by now, but sure, I don't think you can ever get sick of winning, can you?
No, and to be fair, one thing we have in Limerick is we have good long memories. It's not that long ago we were trying to break a 45-year barren spell, so it's the one thing we won't ever take it for granted, because we know the barren spells weren't too far away and may not be too far away again. So if we get an All-Ireland coming up the boat on the Shannon, we'll take it.
It's funny because I was chatting to Fan Larkin yesterday in Kilkenny, and he actually said that about Limerick. He said even though there was all that I guess massive gap in between Limerick winning in '73 and the recent era, he said they always knew that they were unbelievable hurlers in Limerick and brilliant teams, and I guess people outside Limerick couldn't understand how they couldn't get over the line and win a final, but that was probably always the case. It was almost like the Mayo of hurling for some years, in that they kept getting to finals but just couldn't get over the line, Limerick.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, ourselves and Mayo were very, very similar. We were the forever optimists. Every year, since I was born, you get up and championship was about to start, you always felt you had a chance, because I suppose of the quality of the hurlers, but maybe the few missing pieces of the puzzle were only brought together there back in 17 when John Kiley and them took over. Like we had a 3 in a row going back in the early noughties of under 21s. Nothing really came from that, but this team, John managed an All-Ireland 21s. I think most of that team now have made the breakthrough and have All-Ireland medals. So look, we did get a special bunch of lads coming through together, but I think even I spoke to John Kiley before, and he often said he may not even have the best 15 hurlers in Limerick, not to mind the country, but at the same time he has the 15 best going out in the field that are willing to die for each other every day. And individuals and individual skills don't really make a team. A team is made up of a huge amount of moving parts, and to be fair, I suppose it's no coincidence that we probably be going for 5 in a row now, only for that defeat to Kilkenny. But it's probably no coincidence that was the year that Colleen Curran wasn't involved with us either. So I think she has to take a huge amount of credit.
The build-ups even to finals, say 94, 96, like what's that like in the build-up to an All-Ireland? Like, I guess it was probably longer back then. You probably had 3 weeks to soak it up, and obviously there's the shortened build-up and hype this time around. But say 94, your first All-Ireland, like what's that like? Are you invested in it as a player? Are you aware of how massive everything is around you, or is it just kind of a blur when you're involved?
I suppose, you see, back then you play a Munster final the first weekend in July, you play an All-Ireland semi-final a month later, and you play the All-Ireland a month later. So from the time you get out of Munster, you've nearly a 2-month lead in. I suppose the fact then that we were starved for so long, getting into we hadn't been in All-Ireland since I think 81, in 94. So there was a huge groundswell of support. Like, you're out and about, then you're meeting people. You have a lot more time to meet more people. So I suppose the fact that it's only a 2-week lead into a final, and the fact that players these days are so sheltered, like from your game, I presume it's very hard. You get kind of an odd interview here and there, whereas back in our day, it was a free rein who spoke. We weren't, I suppose, media trained, so you'd get more little nuggets out of it that the papers could pick up on and the media could pick up on. And of course, you have social media now, which wasn't back then. We barely had even mobile phones, I'd say, back then. So it was a case of if you went out or went missing, you weren't found till you came home.
No smartphones in the pubs as well to spot the lads out and about. Was there a story about yourselves? I can't remember if it was before 94 or 96. I think it was before 94. We just had to borrow a car maybe.
Well, that was that was the day of the morning in '94 All Ireland. Missed the bus. We were staying somewhere out in Wicklow, Took a 5-hour journey to get from Dublin Airport to Wicklow after flying up. We'd have been better off probably walking from Limerick. And we borrowed a car off of, I think it was a receptionist or a waiter or something in the hotel, and we drove down to where Glenroe was filmed. No sat-nav, no Google Maps, and parked the car outside Teasy's pub in Glenroe and into Mass, because we said if we missed Mass, the manager would have hit us, and back into the car and up the road again. Probably don't even know what it taxed. We definitely weren't insured. But I do remember it was a red Starlet.
Yeah.
So, probably not the greatest the build-ups for an All-Ireland final, but those were different times.
But that final, I guess, is a perfect example of, obviously, yourselves. It's probably tough to talk about when you're on the wrong side of it, but it's a perfect example of an All-Ireland final when you can't switch off. I remember hearing a story from you, it could have been in your Lake Brigade episode, where you talked about, you had someone behind your goals who was going to take the hurls away from it for you, later on if the game was over, but I think you were 5 points ahead with 5 minutes left,
Yeah.
but you had a feeling maybe that Offaly weren't dead and buried just yet.
Yeah, there was just something that day. I remember he came over and he said, "I'll take your hurleys," and I just said to him, "This isn't over yet." I should have probably given them to him.
Manifested.
Yeah, but look, we were comfortable, we were cruising, and then what happened just happened so quickly. But I had a point with Gerard Hegarty's father, George, there about 6 or 8 weeks ago, and we were laughing that I said, these days, I said, a quick puck out from a Quaid to Hegarty, and they're lauded as heroes. I said, we did it 30 odd years ago, I said, and we were two villains. I said, rather than being villains, Joe, I said, we can put ourselves down as market leaders. It just took 30 years to catch on.
That I remember being at that Limerick Cork semi-final in 18, when Nickie, your cousin, of course, makes that unbelievable save towards the end, and the final, of course, when what happened then. Did that moment at the full-time whistle in 2018 banish any of the pain or hurt that you had from 94 and 96? Obviously, you're not directly involved, but when your county does that, does it at least ease some of the bad memories?
Oh, it did, because for the simple reason that I suppose when Nickie brought that off, like if Robbie O'Flynn had put that ball over the bar, we were done. No, obviously, if it's a goal, we were definitely done. But the other side of it, I suppose, was when the last 8 minutes of the final in 18, I will safely say were the worst 8 minutes of my life. And you have to remember, I was there in the pitch for the last 5 minutes of 94. It was actually worse. I thought the whistle would never go. If that last ball that Joe Canning hit in went into the back of the net, I think we probably would have had to cancel hurling in Limerick forever. Do you know, things were just that bad. But the very minute the final whistle went, the emotion that just poured out of everybody. And I think what banished, to me, and it banished it, was Declan Hannon's speech. When he said, I think the way he put it was, for all of the players and people that have gone before to get them to this point, this is for us. And I think that just absolutely banished all the bad memories. No, people like you still bring it up.
Sorry about that, Joe, yeah.
But I suppose there's, what did I say, there's nothing worse than being talked about than not being talked about. So
We're like Mrs. Doyle in the media. We love the misery. I think there's a bit of that, maybe, possibly. We'll bring up some of the happy memories. We don't always focus on the negative, but I see your point. It's a tough one to... I figure, I suppose, enough time has passed that maybe you can talk about it, but it's one of those, at least 18 and what's happened since 18 has maybe banished some of it. That, like, a lot of that team, I was even looking back last night at that All-Ireland Under 16 title that you won in 2012. Not just one, but beat Galway. I think it was 320 to 8 points in the final. And you had Tom Morrissey, you had Sean Finn, you had Cian Lynch at under 16 level. Were you confident? So this is 6 years before these lads go on and win All-Ireland at senior. Were you confident that these lads would be the crux of a team that might, I guess, break that duck and win an All-Ireland?
2 years previous, we went down the night before to the Forrestal, and we stayed the night before, and we came up against huge opposition from the board and things about bringing them down the night before. They wouldn't sleep, and costs and everything. And to be fair, the parents subsidised to stay. And I was asked, why are you doing that? I said, we're giving them a taste of what inter-county hurling should be. You know, you're travelling away, you're travelling together as a team. And I remember that night, about 10 o'clock, we sent the lads up to their rooms, and I told the lads, look, if any of you can't sleep, just give a ring, we'll hit for a walk. So I think about 11:30 that night, Owen Costello rang and said, Joe, we can't sleep. Come on, I says, we go for a walk. So we went for a walk with maybe 10 or 12 of them, and we took off walked down by Waterford Crystal and back up again. We were no sooner inside the door, and I think Keane Lynch rang, and he said, Joe, we can't sleep. I said, Christ, could you not have all come together, back out for a walk again with that bunch of them? But I remember we were walking down the road that night, and even with the two bunches, the crack that the lads were having, pitch dark. If anyone saw us, they'd say, these guys are off their head. And I remember myself and Don Flynn, Ray Ryan, Pat O'Dwyer was with us, Declan Murphy, Joe Sheed, all the backroom team for the A's and the B's. We all went for the walk. And I remember Ray Ryan pointing over at the gang. He said, these guys will win All Ireland. That was at 14. They were just... No, we got beaten in the Forrestal, got lambasted. Oh, why did you go down? And that, but we knew there was something special building in these. And I think out of both the A and the B panel, because that year, Sean Finn and Aaron, we put them back in the Bs because they were making the A panel, but they weren't making the A team. So we explained to them, go back onto the Bs, get your hurling, you'll be the mainstays of the Bs. They understood that. And when it came to 2 years later, Sean was back up playing. Aaron, I think, still was possibly on the Bs at 16s. He was even a late developer, but we always knew there was something in him. Now, the other side of it is, at 14s we played Tom Morrissey in goals. In 15s we played Barry Nash in goals, and in 16s we played Colin Ryan, who had previously was on the panel in 18 in goals. So they're three lads that have learnt, I suppose, not to be nervous, because to get rid of anybody's nerves, you should play them in goals for a season, and playing out the field, you shouldn't be nervous after that. But yeah, I think 9 of both A and the B panel ended up in 18 winning All Ireland medals, which is phenomenal out of one panel of players.
That's some record. That's unbelievable. Like, when you look at them, like the experience that they probably got from all of that as well. That's funny, the goalkeeping thing you mentioned, because even I was chatting to Owen Larkin yesterday in Langton's in Kilkenny, and he was saying when he was under 14s, he was throwing in the goals, and I think Jackie Tyrrell's father was his manager. And he remembers one game we caught a ball, dropped it into his own goal, and he said to him, I never want to play goals again. And I think they said to him, we can't promise you a position outfield, but he was happy to fight for it.
Yeah.
And it was maybe that experience in goals that gave him the focus to go on and play outfield. But maybe there is something in that playing in goals can help you.
Oh, it does. And look, as a goalkeeper, I suppose I'm slow to say this, but I think your best hurler needs to play in goals, because out the field people talk about your first touch. A goalie doesn't need a first touch because he only has one. You know,
yeah.
Like, if you're out the field and you're practicing on your first touch, it eludes that if you miss it, you have a second one. Where in goals, you don't. You have one touch, that's it. Like, you look at Nickie. Nickie played wing back with Limerick 21s. He played midfield with the seniors, I think, during the year of the strike. He's still playing centre back with his club, and probably still one of the best centre backs. There, when they were talking about Declan Hannon on these Facebook forums, someone actually mentioned bringing him out and playing him like Davey did with Billy Nolan. Yeah. Playing him centre back. Eoin Murphy plays centre back with his club. Brendan Cummins played out the field. Do you know? So there's a nice crossover, and I suppose the game has changed so much now. You need a hurler in goals, because you need a fella that's used to delivering ball. They're the new quarterbacks of hurling. In my day, you got the ball, you drove it as far as you could, in the hope that it wouldn't come back that quickly. Yeah. Nowadays, you have a mixture of short puck outs, you have a mixture of long, but if they're going long with a purpose. It's not a case of lob it down for a 50-50. So the goalkeeping game has changed so much, and I've often even thought to myself, okay, would I have cut it there? Because I suppose my forte was shot stopping. But I suppose you adapt. It's like comparing Christy Ring with Mick Mackey, with Henry Shefflin, with Galan. You can't. It's different eras.
Yeah.
You know, and the game has changed so much, and it's just got so much quicker. But yeah, I would advise any prospective really good hurler going goals for a season.
That's good advice. Like as you say, like your forte certainly was shot stopping. So you're probably the perfect man to ask this question too. That Eoin Murphy save for Kilkenny against Clare in that semi-final. Where does that rank? And again, it's probably tough to rank saves because they're all brilliant. And Nickie's in 2018 comes to mind as well. But it was up there. I mean, what a save.
Oh, without a doubt. The only thing I was disappointed was with him that he didn't get his hand to it. Because a fella said it to me. He said, it was actually a Kilkenny man said it to me. He said, great old save. He said, but you're great. He said, you stop one with your hand. He said in 96.
It went differently back then.
I said, yeah, that's because I said I hadn't the reflexes to get the hurl at it. I just stuck my hands up. But it was unbelievable. And it wasn't even the fact that he got the hurl at it. Because if you watch it in slow motion, he was able to adjust. It was in close to his body. He got the hurley up, but it was the turn of the wrists that, no, unless he's an absolute genius, there's no way he could have meant it to go off the crossbar. Yeah. But he was definitely twisting his wrists to adjust the angle of the hurley so that it would go over the bar. And to be able to do that. But look, at the same time, and I know from being there, probably some of the best saves I brought off, you don't have time to think. It's natural reflexes. It's just your body and years of standing in front of balls that it just becomes natural. Like when Peter Duggan struck that, Eoin Murphy didn't think, okay, no, I'll turn the hurley this way, I'll dive, I'll try and tip it over the bar. You don't have time. So it was just absolute natural instinct. And he's I suppose you've two kind of really contrasting goalies at the moment that are both at the top of their game, and to be fair, you'll find it very hard to pick out which is best. Eoin Murphy probably is a better shot stopper than Nickie, marginally.
Yeah.
But Nickie is definitely marginally a better distributor of the ball. He doesn't get turned over as much as Eoin Murphy does, and he's probably more accurate with his shot puck outs. So if you're putting the whole lot into the pot, I don't think anybody from either county, if they had to swap goalies, would be too dishappy. You know, they'd be delighted with both, and they're going to have a huge bearing on the game on Sunday. So they are.
We should touch on the game because it's tough to call, and I think a lot of the Kilkenny people I spoke to found it very, very tough to call this one, maybe more so even than last year. But what's so different about this Limerick team? Because even Martin Fogarty, who I spoke to yesterday, was saying, you know, it's the skill level. It's not necessarily this idea that the Limerick fellas are more physical. They are big lads. But is it just that their skill level over the last couple of years, the small things they've done marginally better than everyone else, or what's been the difference?
I'd be on about Limerick's game plans. And I heard Martin's thing. Hurling hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The pitch is still the same size. You still have a slitter, as Martin said. Okay, it's a bit lighter, it goes farther, it goes quicker. But at the end of the day, you have to catch the ball, you have to strike the ball. You have to put a bit either into the net or over the bar. What Limerick are doing at the moment is they're doing the basics of the game quicker and better than everyone else. Our team's catching up, most definitely. There was, even a couple of years ago, I think it was a Waterford in the semi-final. There was just one passage of play. I think they gave a short puck out to a wing back maybe, and he put his hand up to catch it. It hit his hand. No, he didn't drop it. It just bounced out of his hand, so he had to go a second time. But it was milliseconds now. And bang, he was swallowed up. Ball turned over. Limerick got a score out of it. Whereas you watch Limerick doing it, ball goes to hand. They're generally even facing the way they're playing when they get it most of the time. If not, they're getting it, there's somebody coming facing the way they're playing. They're rarely hitting ball over their shoulder, and I think that's one of the strengths that they have when they're pressing opposition. If you have your opposition hitting the ball out over their shoulder blindly, then you're on the way to winning. Plus, they're willing to take shots from anywhere. They're hitting 50 shots a game. I think at the start of the year, that was one of probably the problems. Our conversion rate wasn't good enough.
Yes.
Against Galway the last day, the first 20 minutes, it wasn't good enough. And they said themselves their work rate wasn't good enough. But what was brilliant about it was they sorted it out themselves. And it seemed like a case of, right, lads, here's the ball, give it to Galway. You have 20-25 minutes now to do your best, see what you're doing against us. You better be enough up, because when we eventually figure out what you're at, we're going to come out and we're going to give it to you. And that's the way it looks in some of the games. That it's a bloody dangerous tactic, and I'd much prefer if they didn't do it, because it's not great for the heart when you're watching it. But these guys don't seem to panic. They'll go, right, we'll eventually figure it out. Yeah. And then we'll give it back to you.
Well, I think if your heart can survive that last 7 or 8 minutes of 2018, you'll survive anything, possibly. Finally, Joe, predictions. How do you think it's going to go? Because I know John Kiley will have his head full of all the conundrums and the matchups this week. But at the end of the day, when that ball is thrown in, it's just going to be the 30 lads on the pitch and then the subs coming off the bench. How do you see it playing out?
Do you know what? I think it'll be quite similar to last year. So I do. The one thing I'm looking forward to is a game of open hurling. It'll be tough. It'll be hard. There could be a few hurleys broken in it, which will delight some of the Kilkenny crowd as well.
Fan Larkin, I love that.
Yeah, you were saying that. Fan likes broken hurleys. He was a huge fan of him in the day. Yeah. But it'll boil down to, I think, accuracy. Who'll make the least amount of mistakes, because there's going to be no cynicism. There's going to be no one dragging fellas to the ground, to try and stop them hurling. They're two traditional hurling teams, and I think it'll be a case, if there's two players there looking at each other, it'll be a case, right, you want to fight, we'll fight. You want to hull, we'll hull. And I actually can't wait for it. I think I'm hoping, like last year's final was probably one of the best in history. I think Sundays will top it. And look, I could sit here and say, oh Jesus, I think Kilkenny will win and this and that. But look, and that's not even being parochial. I think Limerick just have the edge on them. Now, injuries and stuff, Richie English, I think, has gone down with a cruciate. So if we get an injury in our full back line, our cover is a bit thin on the ground. But with John Kiley and Paul Kinnock at the helm, it wouldn't surprise me if they brought Seamus Flanagan back, cornerback, and was well able to play there. They're able to create positions for everyone. I think it's their strength and depth that should see them through, and their experience.
I suppose it's history either way. We've either got the Limerick 4 in a row, or Kilkenny finishing a drought of sorts. So listen, Joe, brilliant stuff. Enjoy the match.
Lovely. Thanks, man, Shane.